I have a student who's following my Foundations of Electronic Music course, and she's coming up against one of the first questions that I often hear when people are producing music, which is, how do I get the volumes of all my elements right? Already in the beginning, when you're just making a drum loop, you have a kick, a snare, and a hi-hat. What volumes should those be at? Well, sadly, I wish the answer was as simple as it needs to be this many decibels, but it's not that simple. The right answer has a few different parts to it that you need to understand. All right, the real answer is this, and get ready for it because it's a bit of a mouthful. You want to set the volume of your elements by ear relative to each other while maintaining plenty of headroom and while listening on laptop speakers. And then you want to refresh your ears by listening to a similar song on Spotify at a volume that's similar to the song that you're currently working on. And that's all. It's as simple as that. And that's all. It's as simple as that. All right, that was a big sentence. Let's look at some of the individual words in it. First of all, I say go by ear. You have to balance your volumes by ear because measurements won't really tell you the full story. Measurements for volume and how we actually perceive volume are slightly different and they don't map very well onto each other. That's why I can't tell you exactly what decibels to place things at, especially in the case of drum sounds, which often have something called a transient at the start. That's like a big burst of energy, just like this. It's a big sound, it's a big splash of energy, and where that reads on the meter doesn't really tell you the story of how loud we perceive that. So you have to do it by ear, and that's not so easy. So the rest of the sentence is there to help you get some clarity and objectivity. And the next step is that you have to do it relative to each other while leaving quite a bit of headroom. Let's remind ourselves where we are in the process. First, you have the creation of musical elements, then you have the balancing, sometimes called the mixing of musical elements, and then later on you're going to have the mastering. And so in the creation of elements, we're not going to worry too much about the volume balancing. Now we're going to worry about the volume balancing, and then later on we're going to worry about making all the elements at the same time louder. But in the balancing phase, we're just worried about relative volumes. How do things relate to each other? So what we do is we take one sound and we make sure that it has a lot of headroom. For example, you take your kick and you give it minus 12 decibels of headroom. The exact amount doesn't really matter, it just has to be enough. Let's say 8 decibels or 12 decibels is plenty. And then you bring up every other sound one by one until it sits at the correct volume relative to your kick. And that's going to then ensure that everything sits well next to each other, and then later on we can bring up the volume of everything, maybe using a limiter or something when we're going to export our songs to bring it into the outside world. But that's not what we're doing right now. Right now we're volume balancing things relative to each other. Then I said you need to do this on laptop speakers. That's a little bit of an unconventional recommendation, but the benefit of laptop speakers is that they don't reproduce bass frequencies, like deep frequencies, very well. And that's an advantage because, especially when you're making dance music, you might be using sounds that have a lot of bass energy, and it can be very hard to judge whether or not a sound is at the right level in your balance, because you might turn it up and then it has too much bass energy, and then you turn it down and then it doesn't have enough mid energy, and so you might get really confused with this. So using bad speakers that don't reproduce bass frequencies helps make sure that when you do your volume mixing, that you're focusing mostly on the mid and the high frequencies. And if those are balanced, then that's 90% of the battle. And then the last point related to referencing, which is that even experienced music producers, they often get a little bit lost in the sauce, because after listening to a lot of different sound, you forget what good or correct sound sounds like. So you need a reference, and all you need to do for that is go to Spotify and find yourself a song that you like the sound of, and that maybe has similar elements to what you're trying to make, and you just play that. And then you make sure that you bring down the volume of that Spotify song to be at approximately the same volume as the volume that you're working on. Because if you make it too loud, it's always going to sound better, because we always subjectively think that louder sounds better. And so if you go back and forth between Spotify and your own song, back and forth, and then you might notice some things. Like I often notice that I might have put my hi-hats too quiet, or that I might not have designed the high end of my song well enough. I notice all these things that I consistently do wrong, and you might notice that as well once you start getting into the habit of using reference tracks. And it's one of the fastest ways to learn, one of the fastest ways to see what your song is missing. And so that method will get you 90% of the way towards a nice balancing sounding piece of music. And then there's like 10% more that you're gonna learn later, which is things like equalization and compression and stuff like that, but don't worry about it, because just balancing your volume using that one sentence that we used earlier, I'm not going to repeat the sentence again, please forgive me, but that one sentence will get you 90% of the way there. If you do have more beginners questions, leave them in the comments below, because I'd like to answer some more videos coaching absolute beginners. If you want to learn in a more structured context, go follow my foundations courses, Foundations Level 1 or Foundations Level 2. Leave a comment below, come see us on our Discord channel, and until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care. Bye-bye.
I mean, there's a very famous dance with this, Oscar.
No, I can't do it. This is not a good rendition of that dance. Oh, nice. Hello, what's up? At this enormous library in Seoul. Whoa. This is Billy, by the way, my brother and video editor. Yo! Hello! Okay.